this is in the beginning of the interview, of course, because they have to talk about Ukraine first, because with the Kharkov offensive and events that have happened recently, they're they're confident right now, right? They feel good. The imperialists, they think that Russia is on the ropes. Of course, today you have Lugansk announcing that later this month there's going to be referenda for Russia to basically absorb for these republics, for most of the Donbass to become part of Russia. This process was inevitable. It was already something that was in the cards before the special military operation, but now it seems like developments are moving in that direction. And so all of this, oh, we're doing so well, we're winning, it's a myth, but that's what they need to promote in order to keep doing what they're doing, which is hurting people. It's hurting not only people in Ukraine and in this special military operation, but it's also hurting working class people everywhere. So as Pelly says, gasoline is down. What can you do to keep that price down from its $5 high while Putin is throttling energy supplies? So Putin is the one throttling energy supplies, not the sanctions, not the fact that Russia provides all of this energy to Europe, right? It's the biggest energy supplier in the world, really. Especially to Europe. It's Putin that's throttling. Why is Putin throttling? Well, the story goes that Vladimir Putin is now, in order to keep up his criminality, he is now sabotaging the West. See, it's painting the West as a victim. That's what they're doing. So what does Biden say? Sure, he is. But we, the United States, are much better shape than anyone else is, in relative to Russia particularly. But he's been trying to do that for a while. He's not going to succeed. So, I'm not going to get into the narrative. I'm not going to read the narrative script from 60 Minutes presenting all of this. But there you have it. I mean, he just says we're in great shape, really. So that huge inflation, the fact that you're essentially in an economic recession, the fact that wages have gone down, the fact that energy prices are higher, everything is higher, all of that means you're doing well. And Putin is not doing well. It turns everything on its head, because last time I checked, the ruble was the highest performing currency of the year in the world, and Russia's economy has been able to stabilize itself by taking controlled measures, both domestically and internationally, to make up for the losses. And now that doesn't mean that Russia's economy hasn't been hit hard, but it does mean that Russia is not doing as bad as the United States had hoped they would. That is for sure. So one of the things that happens in negotiations, okay, so here we go. This is about the transportation strike. So I'm going to keep going. They do more about Ukraine. So Scott Pelley says, Putin is going to try to break your will and use energy prices to do it. Oh, I already read that. Okay. So Ukraine was also improving last week, blah, blah, blah. Is Ukraine winning the war? So this is great. This is what Biden said about is Ukraine winning the war. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what it means to win a war. Joe Biden has voted for wars, but Joe Biden doesn't know anything about the military. He doesn't know anything about what the special military. Joe Biden is not that knowledgeable. I'm not going to say, oh, Joe Biden is just dumb. I'm not going to get into that hyperbole. Democrats got into that with George W. Bush. Not untrue with Trump. Not untrue, but it's also not that helpful. But it's obvious he doesn't know here. He says Ukraine, through their significant help we and our allies are giving them, and their incredible bravery and the incredible determination of the people, Ukrainian people, are not losing a war. So are they winning a war? They're not losing a war, is what Biden said. He won't say that they're winning. He'll say that they're not losing. Okay? So, I mean, for Biden, he doesn't care if they win, if they lose, if they all implode, if ever Ukrainian UAF personnel were to just blow up tomorrow, right? He doesn't care. As long as this proxy war keeps going, as long as there is the capacity to keep it going. So he says winning the war in Ukraine is to get Russia out of Ukraine completely and recognizing the sovereignty. They're defeating Russia. What? So basically he's saying that sovereignty is victory. So if Ukraine's sovereignty is protected, then we'll have a victory. Well, let me think about what happened in 2014. If Ukraine's sovereignty was so important, then Joe Biden wouldn't have been one of the most fervent supporters of the US backed coup in 2014. Coups are a huge breach of sovereignty last time I checked. Coups are literally the definition of what it means to destroy and undermine a country's sovereignty. And no, it did. It literally created a political crisis in Ukraine where you had far right groups jockeying for power. You had U.S. hand chosen politicians privatizing the entire economy, creating such instability, violence in the streets. And then you had Minsk, then you had the violence in East Ukraine become so horrific. Thousands of people dying. And you had these two Minsk Accords that were violated over and over and over again by the US backed regime. And here we are today. That's how we got here. We got here because the United States is not interested in sovereignty or Ukraine winning, quote unquote. Ukraine winning means Ukraine is an abject, servile puppet state beholden to US interests and absolutely separated, cut off from Russia in all ways. That's the only thing that the United States cares about here, not sovereignty. So he talks about the horrors. He says it's been barbaric what Putin has done, the attacks on civilians, everything from civilian hospitals to old age homes to neighborhoods where just ordinary people live. And then Pele says schools, it's outrageous. And so the price Ukrainian people are paying for this war is extremely high, but we're going to stay with them as long as they need our help. So ironclad commitment, he described it. Ironclad commitment. So that's what Biden has to say about Ukraine here. And I'm going to stop the screen for a second before getting into the China piece. That's what he's talking about. They're talking about permanent war here. That's all this is. This is about permanent war. It's about keeping a permanent war in Ukraine. And it's about not sovereignty, not the Ukrainian people, all of those claims, right? That Russia's burning schools and bombing schools and civilian areas and infrastructure, all of that are all things that the United States has done. So really what Biden should be saying is, wow, Russia looks a lot like the United States right now. The reason why Joe Biden won't do that, the reason why the political class won't do that is, one, the United States would never admit to its warmongering. It would never admit that its invasions of Yugoslavia, of Iraq, of Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, etc. We can go on and on and on. It would never admit that those wars were more brutal, if not just as brutal as a special military operation, but we know that they're more brutal, more genocidal, more imperialistic. They would never admit it. So people like Joe Biden, servants of the elite, would never admit such a thing.